Okay, so again, I'm Diane Hall. I'm a member of the grad student and postdoc team here in Career Services. I always like to give people just a little bit of a quick overview of Career Services for those of you who may not have visited with us or interacted with us a lot at this point in time. Career Services serves the vast majority of students across Penn's campus. The exception is a few of the professional schools. We are broken into teams, and each team interacts with a specific student population. The team that Marianne and I are on works exclusively with graduate students and postdocs. So I always want people to know that when you're making an appointment to speak with someone from Career Services and you are a graduate student, you are meeting with the team that works exclusively with graduate students across Penn's campus. So what are we talking a little bit about today? The overview of the overarching theme of this week is the faculty job search. And so two very big components of the application process are CVs and cover letters. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basic components of faculty applications. Then we're going to go over CVs, we're going to go over cover letters, and we're really going to focus on how you can personalize these for each application, which is really a key component of faculty application materials, is personalizing the things that you are sending to institutions. And we're going to talk about resources and samples. There are lots and lots of resources out there that we are excited to share with you. I know that lots of different students are here from different schools. You may be at different areas of focus. You may be at different times in your PhD program. And so hopefully you'll see some samples that are going to be helpful for you. There's definitely lots of resources that are going to be helpful to you. But again, applying to a faculty role is really an individual process. And so I highly suggest that all of you who are entering onto the job market make an individual appointment to talk to us to go over your materials. So just briefly, some of you might have attended Joseph's presentation yesterday about kind of an overview of the academic job search. Let's go over some quick basic components of a faculty application. Almost every institution that you apply to will want a CV, a cover letter, a research statement, teaching statement, they might refer to it as a teaching philosophy, and a diversity statement. Those are pretty standard that I think you're going to see. The diversity statement is certainly something that's become much more important in the last few years, and we have a program about that tomorrow, so you're welcome to attend that tomorrow. Other things that you might see, but not always, teaching portfolio, maybe some examples of syllabi, evals that you've had, awards, particularly at teaching-focused institutions, perhaps a writing sample, depending on your academic area of focus. Faith-based institutions will sometimes want a statement of faith. And so these are things that you may see. As I'm going to keep repeating over and over and over again, all of these needs to be customized for the role to which you are applying. I apologize. Everyone would like to, create these documents over the summer, be ready to roll, and you can definitely get going with that. But then, you need to customize each of these documents to where it is that you're applying. So some of you may be feeling like this right now. So let's get started and talk about what you need to be thinking about as you get started on the academic job search. So tailoring your material. So things that you want to be thinking a little bit about as you're tailoring materials is showing your knowledge of the department and the institution by trying to familiarize yourself with research that they're doing, courses that they might have. What courses do they not have that you think you might be able to fill? What type of students do they have? And thinking a little bit about what your level of experience or background might be in interacting with these types of students, not necessarily as a teacher, but perhaps in other ways. And what resources do they have at their institution that you think you could utilize in your research or teaching? So these are the types of things you want to be thinking about when tailoring your materials. Some overview things to be thinking a little bit about your CV and cover letter. Having the right sections, prioritizing these sections, putting the more relevant information first. And again, that's when you're really going to be changing things according to where it is that you're applying. Using the right language for the department and for the institution. So, everyone who's here at Penn knows that we have lots and lots of different acronyms. is it possible that you can use some of the acronyms that they might use at their department and institution? Thinking a little bit about how you can emphasize the most relevant aspects of your experience. It's going to be very, very, very unusual for any of you or any job seeker, not just on the academic job market, to find a job and think, I am perfectly qualified to do absolutely everything that they say they're looking for. But there are going to be pieces that you are certainly more qualified for than others, and so you're really going to want to emphasize those. Using the cover letter and teaching and research statements to demonstrate that you are qualified, that you have some concrete examples that make you qualified for this. So what is a CV? The purpose of the CV is to get you an interview. That is certainly what it is that you want to be getting out of this situation. It is also a complete listing of all of your academic credentials and accomplishments, jobs, postdocs, places that you've received money, and it's really a living, breathing document. I'm sure all of you have a CV at this point in time, and you have used it for a variety of different purposes. Maybe you used it to get into Penn, maybe you've used it to get grant funding, and so it is a living, breathing document, and in this case, the purpose of using it this way is to get an interview. CVs really vary from discipline to discipline. You can certainly think about tapping into younger faculty in your department or alumni to see what it was that they used for their applications. Certainly talking to your advisor, people on your committee could also be a helpful idea. The caveat that you just need to know is that they often are using this for different purposes than to get a job more recently, maybe for grant funding, etc. The organization of your CV really varies, depends on what type of job you're applying to. Are you prioritizing research? Are you prioritizing teaching? And it absolutely is possible to tailor the CV for each application. So just very quickly, I want to show you some real job ads so you can see some of the keywords that you might be thinking about as you're looking at job postings out there. Marianne, I should just stop real quick and see if we have any questions in the chat.
We don't have any thus far, but if anyone does, feel free to put them in the chat.
Thank you. So here we have Harvard University biostatistics role. This is a tenure track role. And I've highlighted a few of the things here that I think you might be interested in taking a look at. So if you take a look, interests include methodological work in any or all of clinical trials, infectious disease, or health disparities research. Candidates should be enthusiastic about teaching and training, mentorship through our graduate programs. When you look at a job description, you just want to be able to pick out some of the things that you think they're looking for. And then you think about, how do you have experience that might be relevant to what it is they're looking for? And that's what you're going to try and emphasize in your CV and in your cover letter. So we know that Harvard is an institution similar to Penn, very focused on research. Let's look at a contrasting local school, Haverford College, very small liberal arts school, teaching focused institution. Let's look at some of the other things that they say they're looking for. And this is an organic chemistry tenure track position. These are actual real jobs that are available. I just found them all last week. They're one of the first things that they're mentioning is supporting an equitable and inclusive community of faculty, staff, and students, that they're looking for underrepresented candidates to apply. They're giving you some specific things that they want you to have here. In this case, 1 year of professional experience beyond the PhD is required. Okay, interesting. So that would be something that you might want to emphasize. Then they're giving you some information about what it is they want you to teach, but then they're actually saying ability and interest in contributing to other college programs and interdisciplinary initiatives, right? So these are some areas that you might think, aha, all right, these might be some things that I might address in my cover letter, because these may be unique to Haverford, what they're looking for. And a third example is Franciscan University of Steubenville in their political science department. What you may or may not know about the Franciscan University of Steubenville, it is a Catholic institution and it is of the Franciscan order. And so they are one of these institutions that, if you can see down here, I highlighted in the bullet points, a statement expressing your understanding and support for the mission of Franciscan University of Steubenville. That's basically a faith statement, what they're looking for. Not that they maybe necessarily expect that you to be a member of their religion, but that you have an understanding and appreciation of it. Couple of key components in their political science area they're looking for: To teach in American constitutional law and law related to human life issues is also helpful, right? This is something that you're not going to see at every institution, that they're necessarily getting that specific about what it is they're looking for. Franciscan University is a teaching-focused institution. They want a commitment to ongoing research and publication efforts and other scholarly activity. Previous track record of publications is helpful. So you can really kind of pick these apart a little bit and see what is it that you might want to talk about in a cover letter, what might you emphasize in a CV. And so I'm showing you these samples just as a way to kind of get you thinking that it can be really helpful to have some job in mind that you might be interested in applying for as you start to put these documents together. Okay, so things to think about when drafting your CV. Committees read them for three things: academic pedigree, productivity as a scholar, and institutional and departmental priorities. The primary purpose for your CV is to glean information. Make it easy for them to find what they're looking for, right? They are scanning this quickly. Make it easy to find what you're looking for. This is the one document in your application packet that I'm very confident everyone will look at. And it's really your academic life in detail. And again, as I keep repeating, it needs to be revised to be specific to each position. So these are some of the categories that you may see in CVs. Standard meaning you're probably you're going to use these categories in any CV that you're using. Additional categories based on, again, what you're applying for, as well as based on what your experience might be. So you'll see in this column on the left, standard things that every CV is going to have. On the right, again, dependent on what you're applying to and what your own personal experience is. So the big question is, what goes where? So let's talk a bit about formatting. So page one is prime real estate. I've already said we're really feeling pretty confident that anyone who's looking at your application documents is definitely looking at the CV. So let's take real advantage of that first page, putting the most relevant information there. Try and keep it as simple and as uncomplicated as possible. Many PhDs and postdocs that I meet with in my time at Career Services have a CV that you just keep perpetually adding to over the years, and then you need to use it for something, and it sort of has gotten a little bit, the formatting has gotten a little bit wonky, and so it's really important to, be consistent. Be consistent when you're using things like indents, bold, italics. It can be helpful to include your name on each page with a page number. Try and keep it the same size and type of font throughout. And I also think it's really important that all of the documents in your application packet kind of look the same. So using the same font on each of those documents is helpful. Generally speaking, it's reverse chronological throughout. So if you're a current PhD student, that's going to be first, then a master's degree, then your undergraduate degree, etc. So name and contact information, let's not spend a lot of space on this. Again, I see a lot of CVs that have a lot of space taken up for this, and it's really just not necessary. So keep it very simple. Name goes first. If you've already graduated, add PhD after your name. I see a lot of people labeling the document as a curriculum vitae. They know that, you don't need to say that. You can use your own department's address or your personal contact information, really whatever you prefer. I just don't think you need both. It just takes up unnecessary space. And the reality is they're all going to email you most likely anyway and not mail you anything. So along those lines, just give them one email and phone number. If you have a pen email, use that. If you want to use a personal email, use that. Just don't give them too many choices to reach you. If you have a professional website, that can certainly be something appropriate. No personal information or photos. I know this very much differs from international CVs, in which a lot of people put photos on them, but in the US, the standard is not to provide that type of information. So here's my information. This is my address where I am today. This is how I might list myself if I were applying for faculty roles. Next is going to be your education section. For most of you, this is going to be your first section. Make it clear when you expect to graduate. I know that this is a moving target for almost all of you. And I think, an expected graduation date is as good as you're going to get. They don't really care when you started. They only care when you're going to finish. Again, PhD first, then the others in reverse chronological order. Definitely include undergraduate honors. I'm not sure your GPA is necessarily that relevant if you're including honors. Sometimes that's indicative of a higher GPA. Some of you who are postdocs may want to include your postdoc first. Certainly, absolutely fine. I will see some people list current position as their first category. More commonly, what I see is someone labeling that first section education and training, listing the postdoc first, then the PhD, and going backward from there. Some detail is necessary for your degree, your field of concentration, what's the title of your dissertation, your advisor, and a succinct, it's just basically a very succinct summary of your research focused. So here are two examples of real people and how they've listed their education section, one in the sciences, one in the humanities. So this is giving you a little bit of information as well. I see some things in the chat. Are any of them questions, Marianne?
Yes, we do have a question. What are your views on listing one's pronouns on the first page of the CV?
I think that is absolutely appropriate and something that you are welcome to do if you would like to.
And we have an additional question. Is it true that they consider all applications up to the end date, or do they only seriously look at those that are submitted in the first 1 to 2 weeks?
It's a really excellent question that I don't have a definitive answer to. It really depends on the institution, it depends on who's running the search committee. It depends on if their HR is involved or if they're collecting them in some other way. So there really isn't a great answer to that. Some job ads will specifically say, deadline of this, priority given to applicants who receive by this day. I do think if you see something interesting and you are ready to apply, that you should move forward with that. I also do feel like they generally abide by the deadline, but it is possible that they could be looking at things before the deadline comes. That's sort of difficult for us to assess. Would you agree, Marianne?
Absolutely. I think it's really, institution by institution in terms of, when they decide to start looking at the applications that have been submitted.
Yeah, exactly. Great question, though. Good one about the pronouns, too. That's an excellent question. Honors and awards. Some people have enough awards that they would like to make this a separate category. Others include it under our relevant degree. It's really up to you. You can include recognizable and significant awards. If you have multiple, some people will say selected. As an international student, just keep in mind that you may have some honors that you obtained abroad that might not be intuitively understood by people in the US. And so you need to think a little bit about why was this award given? Did you apply for it? How competitive was it? And is there some way that you can briefly describe it to someone who isn't familiar? Because the important thing to think in mind is that without context, many awards don't really mean very much to the reader. If you have an R01 grant, okay, people know what that is, but other kinds of honors and awards, they may not be aware of what the importance is. Here are two ways that I've seen people list theirs. Again, these are real CV examples of how people have listed theirs. So that'll give you an idea. Two optional sections that you might see on CVs would be research interests and teaching interests. So this is a way, if you want to give a search committee a real easy way to see kind of what it is you're focused on. You may be able to use some keywords, particularly if there are any keywords that tie in with what you think they are looking for, with what your specific research interests and expertise areas are. Again, looking at the job description. And this is just a quick way for you to show the direction you want your research to go without necessarily having a lot of experience in that area. So lots and lots of PhD students are doing something now, looking to kind of pivot and shift in another direction as they move forward. And this can be a way to sort of say what those interests are if you don't have experience or a lot of experience in that. So I'll show you a couple quick examples of that as well. What are these areas of specialization, research interests, different ways to list that. If you are applying to a role that is teaching focused, you could also think a little bit about teaching interests. And so this is a chance to briefly describe courses that you are qualified to teach, even if you have not had the chance to teach them yet, right? Which many of you may find yourself in this experience where you think, well, I could probably teach this, but I haven't done it yet. And so how can you maybe describe that in some way? Teaching interests can be a way to do that. This is a way that you can list topic areas, maybe proposed course titles. Again, you're really going to want to tailor this section, depending on what it is you're applying to. You could also list courses you've taught that you know they want you to teach or that you want to teach and that you think they would find interesting. So a very key component to all of your CVs are going to be the experience section, right? And many of you are going to have two different experience sections, one focused on research and one focused on teaching. Again, the order of which is first is going to be what is it that you're applying to, right? So thinking back to when we looked at those job postings that I showed you from Harvard and when I showed you from Haverford, Harvard, I think you're going to put your research first for biostatistics. For an organic chemist at Haverford College, you might think about putting your teaching first because, again, teaching focused institution. So research experience is going to encompass projects, experiments that you've worked on, the methods that you may have used for the research, any collaborations that you've been involved with, and certainly findings or publications associated with your work. Teaching experience can be all of these things. So classes you have taught, classes you have TA'd, they could be guest lecturers as well. I just looked at a CV of someone yesterday who had quite a few guest lecturing opportunities, labs you've been involved with, mentoring and other informal teaching experiences. So think a little bit about many of you as graduate students may have master's students working in your lab. You could have undergraduates that you're working with. And mentoring can be another way to describe teaching as well. So here are two examples, one from a postdoc in the sciences and another from someone who's coming from Annenberg, who's really highlighting a little bit about some of their research experience, both with the postdoc level as well as in graduate school. It looks like we have a question. Great question. So someone is at Victoria. What are your thoughts on including summer-long REU experiences from undergrad on a CV for a faculty app? I actually think that that makes sense. And so my understanding of research experience for undergraduates, they're often funded by the National Science Foundation. And I think that they are really designed with the idea to get undergraduate students excited and interested in research, right? And so that could be pointed to as the genesis of, maybe where some of your interest in pursuing a PhD came from. So I think absolutely that could go on a CV. It just might not take up a lot of space, but it would go under the research experience question. Someone's asking about honors and awards. Regarding honors and awards, what do I think about including very prestigious honors received during undergraduate studies? Yes, I do think that makes sense. It depends, again, what the honors and awards are. There's multiple choices that you can do. So as I mentioned earlier, in your education section, if you were elected to Phi Beta Kappa or Tau Beta Pi, that would go under your education section. If they were other types of honors and awards, perhaps they would go under the honors and awards section, but you don't necessarily have to have honors and awards right after education. It could be later. If we have, Samantha asked another question, if we have taught a course of our own design, how can we make an appropriate note of that in the CV? Should any additional information be included about it, or is that to be elaborated on in something like a cover letter or a portfolio? Great question. And I do think that the appropriate place to really elaborate on this would be in the cover letter and in the portfolio. You could note that you created it and designed this class, but that I do think that the cover letter and in a teaching portfolio is really where you can grow that. Anat is asking teaching experience outside of the US. I guess you're wondering if that should be included. Yes, particularly, I think it should be included, particularly because lots of graduate students have limited teaching experience. And if you're applying to a role that does look for teaching experience, you want to be able to pull from all those experiences. So great questions. Thank you.
Diane, we have one more question.
Oh, one more. Wow.
Wouldn't the research experience look quite similar to the education and training section in this format?
Oh, okay. That one did not. Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
So it's just above Samantha's question. Wouldn't the research experience look quite similar to education and training in this format?
Not necessarily, because you can describe it more, right? I mean, it just depends. You just have to really look at the different formats that are out there. It depends what kind of research experience that you have. Generally speaking, in education and training, you're just like listing factual information. In research, you may extrapolate and start to describe a little bit more of the research, which is not something that you do usually in the education section. So many questions. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to lose track of the questions. So if you can keep going, Marianne.
The next question is, what about previous work experience that is not related to your field of graduate studies?
We're going to get to that in a second, a professional experience section.
Then we have a question about TA experience. How about TA experience from the undergraduate years relevant to the field?
Sure, I would definitely include that in teaching experience. Again, I think a lot of times for teaching assistant, and as you see the slide that we're on right now, this person is saying teaching assistant. They're not really describing it because most people kind of know what a teaching assistant does. So if you were grading and holding office hours and that sort of thing, you may not necessarily need to describe it. And the same might hold true for undergraduate experiences.
Next question. Is it common in the US to also include academic performance metrics such as H-index on the CV? And if it is, what section would we place this under?
I do not know what the H-index is. Do you, Marianne?
I do not know.
Yeah. Again, some of these questions may be very, very, very specific to your situation and what it is you're studying, and that's excellent. And that's when we would say, you know, let's get you scheduled for an appointment so we can go over some of these details.
Two more questions. Honors and awards overseas, not in the US.
Oh, would you include those? Yes. I mean, I think what I had said earlier was you just have to think a little bit about, does this need some level of explanation? Like just listing the award, does that mean anything to the reader? Or do you need to explain a little bit about what it was to give it some level of context?
And how to mention awards from another country into the CV?
As I just mentioned, I think that you can mention them, but you just need to have some context. Again, it would like this is getting to be a really specific question that I think would be best answered if we could see the CV and say, can you explain this to me? Okay, now once you've explained it to me, then I can tell you a little bit about how you might list it on your CV. Okay. Is that it for now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Great questions, everyone. Thank you. Okay. So I just want to show you one more example of teaching experience, different ways that people are listing things in terms of guest lecturing, teaching assistant, teaching and supervisory experience. There's lots of different ways that you can mention this, and it just depends on what it is your personal experience is, while keeping in mind what it is you're applying to. So professional experience, someone asked this question. Generally speaking, I lean more toward including relevant professional experience outside of academia. And you might have this section later in the CV. But sometimes I do realize that there are people who went to undergraduate, took several years off, then came back to graduate school. And maybe what you were doing in that time isn't necessarily relevant, but you do want to sort of show your time, like what was it that you were doing during that time? And so if it's relevant experience, you may think a little bit about describing what the work was that you were doing. If it's less relevant, you might just list, you know, the time frame and where you were working during that time, just to sort of cover that time frame. So again, an individual situation depending on what your experience is. Again, thinking a little bit about industry roles, nonprofit experience, anything that you've done within a university, maybe an administrative role. Publications and presentations. Any of you that have publications are going to want to make sure that you include this. If you have a long list, it's perfectly fine to divide and subdivide by different topics. I'm listing peer-reviewed papers, reviews, posters, talks, abstracts, etc. If your list is shorter, which many of you it will be, and that's fine, it may not make as much sense to subdivide into different categories. You can just list them together. You can also list articles that are in preparation and you think realistically will be published. This can really be helpful to show, you know, your work is moving forward and that you will have research upcoming between now and when you actually potentially start this faculty role that you can build on. But you do want to mark these as in preparation or submitted so that you're not insinuating that something is published that has not been. Here are some examples, ways that people have listed people. And then these are some of the ideas that things that you might include under publications. And then this is someone who's chosen to break things out, you know, book in progress, peer-reviewed articles, etc. Scholarly and professional memberships. Many of you are members of different types of professional organizations. This category is really discipline specific. I think it's fine, you know, I'm using the example of American Chemical Society 2019 to the present, to just list it that way. If you're just a member of it, you don't really need to often describe it. Academic service, if you have been involved in the scholarly community, both here at Penn or within your field, you can include this information: panel moderation, journals where you served as a reviewer, student group involvement, any departmental activities, community outreach. All of these things may fall under this category. If you've ever sat on a search committee for a faculty role as a student, those kinds of things can be helpful to include. Grants. Use this category if you've received significant funding. Depending on the funding, this could move up in the order of things on your CV. Dissertation and fellowship support is usually listed under honors and awards. Grant writing experience could be highlighted here. You need to list the funding agency and the projects that were funded, and the work supported by the grant can be discussed in detail under research experience. I think we have a bunch more questions rolling in. I can stop now and take those before I keep going, Marianne.
Yes, so we have a couple questions. One is, what about publications in a field that you're not currently in? Is there a place in the CV for that?
I mean, I think they would still go under publications, even if it's not the field that you're currently in. All publications kind of belong together, even if they're in your field or not, would be my general assessment.
The next question is, for articles currently under review, would it be okay to name the journals they are being reviewed at?
Yes.
Next question is, what about grants that were won by the lab, meaning the PI, but were co-written with a postdoc?
Gotcha. I mean, I think what you have to think a little bit about is checking in with the PI to make sure that they're okay, that you include that information. And this might be something that could be talked about in a cover letter, because generally a CV is sort of your personal accomplishments. And even though you may have contributed to this, it may not be your accomplishment that the PI got the grant and not you. So again, it would be a good time for you to have a conversation with them to get their sense of, you know, how do they feel that you should present this externally. But the cover letter becomes a thought of mine. Great questions. Okay, still so much to cover. Okay, so skills. Not everyone's going to have a skills section. This may or may not make any sense. You know, sometimes I've seen people include language skills, computer software programming, teaching course management systems, lab or technical skills for those of you in the STEM fields. But again, not everyone's going to have this question, section, not question. And you just have to think about what makes most sense given, you know, what it is you're applying for and what your own personal background is. References. Generally speaking, you only want to give the contact information of the people who will actually be writing for you. So if they say they want 3, give them 3, don't give them 5, right? And so you want to give the contact information, titles of all those people who will be writing for you, and don't provide different contacts than those are submitting letters. You can really list this very simply: the name, the title, department, institution, contact information right there. So you guys have asked some really great specific questions, and I'm going to get to your questions before we move on to talking about cover letters, but I just want to show you where you might be able to find some samples that would be helpful for you. This is a great place to look on our website. Marianne's going to drop the link in the chat, but there's some excellent samples here that can be helpful. And as we move forward at the end, I'm going to go over some online resources, and there's some other places that you can find some resources of how different people have presented their information. So before we talk about cover letters, let me stop and go over any questions that people might have. I think I might be able to catch this. Could I recommend a good template for a CV? Well, here are some samples. I don't really recommend a template. I think that what you need to do is think about your own experience and how you want to present it, but these samples will give you some ideas of how other people have presented theirs. And again, at the end, there's some other resources I can share that would be helpful for you. Is there a way that we can separate competitive grants from, say, summer funding? I mean, you just have to indicate that in your description. Again, this becomes more of an individual question. Like if you have one competitive grant and 4 summer fundings, well, it might not make sense to have like a separate grant section just for one thing. So it really becomes an individual answer based on what your own personal experience is. All right, let's see. I have an unconventional reference from Penn Emerging Scholars. Can this add to the total number, or does it replace one of the research letters? I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by an unconventional reference, but generally speaking, if they ask for 3 references, you provide them with 3 references, and then you need to select how you're going to decide who those 3 people would be. Should you include unfunded grant applications, grants that you applied for but didn't get funding for? I tend to not list those on a CV. If what you're trying to show is experience in writing grants, you could certainly talk about that in a cover letter. But you generally, I do not list grants that weren't funded. Is it really necessary to list an address on your CV, or is just a phone number and email okay? Yeah, you don't need to list an address if you don't want to, for reasons of space you're indicating, which is a great point. I do see a fair amount of PhDs and postdocs who want to list their office address on their CV because it makes it inherently obvious from the get-go where they are and what department they're in. So I think sometimes that's why people choose to list that. If you are applying for a job and you didn't want to do that, you could certainly just say your name, your email, your phone, and just say Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That would be fine. Great questions. Okay, so moving on to cover letters. Don't want to run out of time. Okay, so what is the goal of a cover letter? It serves as an introduction to the rest of your application. What you're really trying to do is synthesize all of your application documents. Who are you as a researcher? Who are you as a teacher? And how does your background align with their institution? So you're trying to really speak to your interests and to your experience in research, in teaching and mentoring, in university service. So things that you want to be thinking a little bit about. It's not really a rehashing of your CV, right? But there is some repeating. You're trying to highlight your experience and your expertise as relevant to the position, as relevant to the department, as relevant to the institution. So that's really the main focus. Your primary job is to say, okay, here's your job ad that you say what it is you're looking for. Here's my application documents, CV, research statement, teaching statement. And what the cover letter is trying to do is draw conclusions between that job ad and all of your application documents and say, okay, this is why I have the experience and qualifications that you're looking for. So how does your experience fit into their mission, their vision, their goals? Look at the different profiles of faculty in the department that you're applying to and see where you can draw some connections. There are blocks or sections, paragraphs really devoted to research and teaching. Again, the space that you're devoting to each of those depends on what you're applying to. And the length of the letter somewhat is dictated by what other materials are asked for. So generally in terms of length for a cover letter, I say 1 to 2 pages. Sometimes in the sciences, I think people lean a little bit more toward 1. In the humanities, it's very common. Humanities and social sciences, it's very common to see very dense 2-page cover letters. So that's sort of a guideline. Important, do not send form letters. They can see right through it. Cover letters are hard, they're not easy. They really need to be tailored to what it is you're applying to. I think a lot of times people save them for the last minute and then they're frustrated. They're like, oh, this took a lot longer than I thought. So writing a good cover letter takes time and needs to be revamped for each and every application. Again, think about who's on the search committee. Always keep that search committee in mind at all times. Keeping your focus of your letter on what is it that I think they're looking for and what is it that I think is important to them and how can I write the letter to that perspective. Being honest about your interests, so don't pretend you're really super interested in something that you're not. And write in a very clear and professional style. Write only what you're comfortable and sincere in saying. Okay, I think, do we have a question? Oh, thanks. You're welcome. Okay, so let's dive in. So tailoring content. I really am so sorry that I keep saying this over and over and over again, but this is really what we want to be thinking about. So first steps, Do your research. What seem to be the priorities of the department and the institution? What do others in the department study? And would you have a niche? Is there something they're missing that you might be able to fill? What kind of unique resources do they have in their department, in their institution? And what are the primary responsibilities of the position? So let's take a look at formatting. You can certainly use departmental letterhead for this. And I think that sometimes if, assuming that the cover letter is the first thing that goes on top, that can look nice. You can usually touch base with your graduate coordinator to get the letterhead. It doesn't have to be, but I do see that a lot. Formatted as a business letter, and again, 1 to 2 pages. So the different elements that you're going to see when you start your cover letter: salutation, right? Like who you're addressing the letter to. Opening paragraph, introductions, then the body, right? What is it you want to prioritize? Are you prioritizing research? Are you prioritizing teaching? And then that final paragraph explaining why the position, why the institution is a good fit, and offering to provide them with additional information. So the first is going to be the salutation. In an ideal world, you're going to find out who the chair of the search committee is. In this case, it's me, Professor Hall. So dear Professor Hall and members of the search committee, do not use dear sir or madam. You may not be able to figure out who the chair of the search committee is. They may not tell you. And then I think it's fine to just say dear members of the search committee. But you do want to, address it as a professional letter and do your best to figure out who the chair is. Opening paragraph, right? You want to start right off by indicating what it is you're applying for, keeping in mind that it's possible that their department has multiple opportunities and they need to be able to figure out, are you applying to position A, position B? I often see a lot of students write, I am writing to express interest in, but you're not really writing to express interest in, you're writing an application. So you can be very direct about that. I am writing an application for the assistant professor position in the biostatistics department at Harvard University. You can always say how you learned of it. I think that's interesting for them to know. Did you see it on a conference website? Did you see it on their website? Where did you find it? Briefly stating why you're interested in the job and why you're interested in the institution. Say where you are now. You're currently a PhD student scheduling to defend, etc., or you're a postdoc in this specific department. Where you want to indicate that you're at Penn, and a very brief statement with your dissertation title and advisor's name. So this is that kind of opening paragraph. Then you're going to really see the meat of it is these body paragraphs. So you're going to focus on your dissertation details, future research, current related research, teaching. The length of this teaching section is really going to depend on the job focus, and university service is really optional. So if you, again, go back to those job postings that we looked at earlier, Haverford College, they're really looking for people that are interested in interdisciplinary work and university service, right? So for a school like Haverford College, you may have a paragraph about your experience at the university service and how you envision that you could potentially contribute to theirs. College, not university, sorry. Body paragraph. So this is really your opportunity to paint a picture of you in this role. Again, you're going to go back to the job ad as I showed you earlier, where we highlighted certain things, and you're going to really address like what are the requirements, right? So we noticed that Haverford College was specifically looking for someone who, as of July 2022, would have 1 year of professional experience beyond the PhD, right? So they're looking for someone who's a postdoc, most likely. And so you're going to want to address those types of things in these body paragraphs. It's a specific requirement or desired skill. You want to talk about it. Brief but specific, which I know is challenging, examples to demonstrate skills and experience without repeating your CV. Your interest in conducting research and elaborating on your current research, past research topics, what you think you will do with them and who you might collaborate with. Again, trying to figure out what kind of niche you might fill. In a teaching focused role, you're going to really emphasize interest, commitment, and experience in teaching and in undergraduate education. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example when I get to the teaching section. So we will get there in a second. Someone asks, how do we know who is specifically on the search committee? Can we write and ask them, right? Sometimes they will specifically say that, right? I'm seeing this less and less because so many applications now are very processed electronically through a centralized system at the university. But some job ads will say questions can be directed to, and they fully expect that you might call or email the search committee chair. You might just be able to do a little bit of research. You may be able to look on their website. You can always call, although now, I think people are coming back to work, certainly here at Penn we are, and ask the graduate coordinator, hey, I'm applying for the job. Can you let me know who the chair of the search committee is? I wouldn't spend too much time really digging in deep to this, but it can be useful information to find out and then to tailor your letter. It's a good question. It's a little investigation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the research paragraph or paragraphs, depending, like if you're a postdoc, you're gonna have multiple paragraphs talking about your research. A description of your current research, an overview of what the big question is, how did you do or are you currently doing this research? But you really want to be thinking a little bit about why is this significant in the broader field? Why should other people find this important? And what is it that you're going to be working on next? Because ultimately what search committees want is they want to hire someone who's the best person for the job for sure, but they also really want to hire someone that they think can make tenure, right? So like what's the plan research wise for you, and can you draw connections to what it is they're looking for? Teaching paragraph or paragraphs, again, depending on what you're applying to. A teaching statement or philosophy can be a good basis for this section. Plug for tomorrow, CTL's doing a joint program for us tomorrow about teaching statements. Go over your teaching philosophy briefly in 1 to 2 sentences. Connecting your research to teaching, if possible, is always helpful. A broad overview of how you have in the past, through previous teaching experience, or would bring in the future, your teaching philosophy into the classroom. And a discussion on what you could teach. And this, again, needs to match with what they're looking for. So this is where it really comes back to tailoring things, where you really want to make sure that you're talking about what you could teach that is something that you know they need, something that they've already asked for, not a class that they would never offer at their institution. Final paragraph, reinforcing your interest and your enthusiasm, tailored to the institution, right? What is it about this role that's really exciting to you that you want to apply to? Why is this institution a great fit for your research and or teaching? Thanking them, and then ending with a professional closing in your full name. So you're going to say kind regards, comma, your name, sincerely, comma, your name at the end, full name, first and last name. So I think there's another question. Let's see. Where on the CV or in the cover letter is the place for public-facing academic work, like a blog, a podcast, or an academic-related social media account? There's a couple different places that you can put this on the CV. Sometimes people will put it in their contact information. If you have a website, that kind of thing. You could also have, it depends what you're studying and how relevant, if you're a person who's applying for communication faculty roles, then, these things are going to be even more important. But I do think that sometimes it goes under the contact information. It could go under a separate section, more down toward the bottom, most likely, unless it's really relevant to your research, if it's really relevant to the role that you're applying to. Christopher's asking for examples of cover letters, and I'm about to show you where you can find them. Yes, absolutely. Cover letters are just so tricky, though, because they're so specific to what you're applying to. A couple of good places. We do have some samples on our website. Imagine PhD, which is a website that I'm going to go over in a moment. They have 2 different areas where you can see actual application packets that people have used, and there are cover letter samples within those. And they've broken those packets into teaching focus and research focus. I'm going to show those to you in a second. All right, so let me see. Okay, great question. Someone asked, where on the CV might something like a CTL certificate or additional training go? That is an excellent question. Whoa, I just made this way too big. Sometimes I have seen, particularly if you're with CTL, I'll use CTL as an example. I have seen people under their University of Pennsylvania PhD political science, they might have a bullet point that says certificate from the Center in Teaching and Learning, right? That is particularly if you're applying for a teaching focused role, to put that in your education section could be a place where you could put that, but it could go in other sections as well. Someone asked, should you write about how other professors' work in the department itself has influenced your work? I have gotten advice that you shouldn't because it is writing like a student and not a colleague. You know, again, this is a very specific question. I do think that you need to write the letter as if you are trying to present yourself as a future colleague and not as a student. But even as a potential colleague, you're going to collaborate with other people. You're going to have influences of other people. So I think depending on how you worded it, that could potentially be something that would make sense. Is it fair to assume the search committee members look at the cover letter before anything else? I really can't say exactly. I think if you are you're looking at a packet, the cover letter is probably on top. My hunch would be they're probably looking at your CV first, would be my guess. They can really look at it in whatever order they want. And so I know for me, when we've had open opportunities in my office and I've been looking at things, I tend to look at the resume or CV first before I read the cover letter. Because if you're looking for basic qualifications, you can find those more quickly in the CV. So we don't really know. There's no rule. They can kind of look at things in whatever order they want. Good questions. You guys are great. So let's go over some other online resources that I think would be helpful for all of you. This is our website. Marian is going to be dropping in the chat all of these links to the different resources that I'm mentioning. So don't feel like you have to rush to take a look. So we do have a section on our website on documents. And so you'll see cover letter, CV, research statement, teaching philosophy, diversity statement. If you click on each of these, there are samples that you can find for each of those. So this can be one great place to take a look. On our website, we have this, well, it's a PDF booklet, but it is PDF, the Applying for Faculty Positions Guide. It has an overview. It talks a lot about interviewing. It talks a lot about sample interview questions and negotiating for faculty jobs. They're not CV and cover letter samples in there, but it talks a little bit about that. 2 videos that you might be interested in watching. They are about 10 minutes each on our YouTube page. This is So You Want to Be a Professor in STEM Fields, and we have So You Want to Be a Professor in the Humanities and Social Sciences. Both of these videos would be worth your while, just for a quick overview of kind of the highlights of what you want to be thinking about. I mentioned Imagine PhD earlier. Imagine PhD is a wonderful resource for lots of different things. Imagine PhD was an outgrowth of a recognition that students in the humanities and social sciences primarily really needed to have some sort of assessments available to assess careers of interest both in and outside of academia. And so you are welcome to get on here and do some of the assessments. If you go under resources and job family resources, I mentioned earlier, you can see these content packages. These are just screenshots, but you can take a look at research-intensive faculty roles, teaching-intensive faculty roles, and you'll see job ads that have been analyzed, CVs that are tailored to that job ad, and then a tailored cover letter. So this can be, and I'm only showing you sample content package number 1. There's multiple of each, so you can take a look at that. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to look at Aurora by Beyond the Professoriate. This is a new resources that we in Career Services launched in June. Excellent resources for PhDs and postdocs who have interest in faculty careers as well as outside of faculty. And these are just some screenshots of some of the things that you can do. You can actually download workbooks. So if you'll see up here, how to apply for a faculty position in a STEM discipline, go to this unit. You can download different activities that you can do. There are lots and lots and lots of different videos. How to apply for a faculty position in a STEM discipline. There's a similar video for the academics, for academic positions in humanities and social sciences. And so there are also lots of video profiles that you can watch of people who are faculty members in lots of different careers at different institutions, and you can see video interviews with them. So great resources there in Aurora. Oh, sorry, I should have showed you this. This is what I meant. The video library of one-on-one interviews. So you'll see these are different people who are faculty members at different places, and you can watch interviews with them about their job search that they took. The National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity is something that Penn has paid for you to have access to. They have a core curriculum, which has lots of resources for you to help you in terms of your academic career, doing your work here at Penn, and then lots of information on including podcasts and other things that you can take a look at for going into faculty roles. So get individual support for your questions. Some of you have asked, and I'm going to get to questions at the end. I know we're running over, so I thank you all for sticking with me. But lots of you have had very individual questions. We are happy to meet with you. We can meet with you Monday through Friday in career advising appointments. We also have drop-ins every afternoon, or we're calling them same day appointments, which are 15-minute appointments to go over things quickly. These are some of the things that we can do. I've highlighted. We have specific appointments available on Friday just for PhDs and postdocs who maybe have learned some things through the programs this week and really want to get some individual feedback. So look for those specific appointments on Friday. You can make appointments through Handshake. All of you found your way here today, which means that you can log into Handshake effectively. So you log into Handshake to take a look at how you would schedule an appointment.